So this video is about quality control, and I have worked in quality control. I've had in my past life, I was heavily involved in quality control, and that was part of my job to make sure that very accurate measurements were maintained. And I was actually testing a measuring device to measure something else. So I had to have checks and balances to make sure that that piece of equipment was traceable to international standards. So I know a little bit about quality control. And what we're talking about today is that we've had one of the major cycling magazines, the online cycling magazines, basically spilled the beans and basically said, hey, yeah, look, you know, the industry has bad quality control. When you're fitting parts onto the bike, you have to have them faced, you have to remove the surfaces, make sure they're nice and fat, so the whole bike works properly. And they're basically saying, well, you know, they should really be getting a frame that's already faced. It should already be finished. We shouldn't have to be doing that. It should be, we just bolt it together and it works as advertised. Well, anyway, let's roll the intro and let's have a little bit of a discussion about this quality control and how like parts on the bike, even though they're not that specific part, can be affected by other parts on the bike. Now the problem is if you make one part of the bike and that device or that component on the bike is not made correctly, or it's significantly out of spec, then it can affect the other part of the bike. So for instance, if you've got a frame and it's not lined up properly, your back wheel is not in line with your front wheel, obviously the bike's going down the road like a crab, and when you lean it one way or the other way, it's not going to respond in the same way because you have the back wheel further out from the front on one side or the other, like this or like this. So when you lean it over, the way the bike reacts will be quite different. So that's one thing. So if you just have your frame out of alignment, it's going to have an impact on how the bike handles. Then you've got other things like the wheels. Now, there was one instance which was on Cam Nichols, and they found that the hub had not been made correctly where the disc brake fits on. And what had happened is when he tried to put the caliper, which is part of the frame, and the rotor, which is part of the hub, they didn't line up properly, and the mechanic just couldn't make that disc brake work correctly. So that was a problem, and this is a problem that falls into the end user or to the mechanic that's building it for the end user. And then you've also got other problems like facing surfaces. The surfaces need to be faced or fitted properly, so when you put bearings or calipers or other components that fit to the frame, they need to be fitted square and in the right position. So just for instance, just say you've got a caliper, if those nuts that are embedded into the frame, they're not in line, or the surface is not flat or correctly, or they're out of skew, then when you come to put the caliper on, same thing as when you have the free hub and the rotor's not in the right spot, the caliper doesn't align with the disc, and of course you're never ever going to get that brake to work correctly. Now inherently that's not the group set or the brake's problem. It's caused by something else like the frame. And it's the same with the headset. If the bearings aren't seated properly, then you're going to have problems with the steering, so forth. You could have movement and wear in there. And then we know that these the steerer stems, if you have any movement or wear, then you start to get a ring which creates a weak spot and those steerers can fail. So having the whole frame, and not just the frame, but the components, has a major effect on the overall performance of the bike. And we've even seen this with bottom brackets as well. Manufacturers have gone from press fits back to a threaded bottom bracket because they've had problems maintaining the quality control of the press fits, and we've had creaking and all sorts of problems with bottom brackets, and it's not been an isolated incident, it's quite common. So this is why they've gone back to these threaded bottom brackets, because they have a little bit more give when it comes to squeaking and tolerances in the bottom bracket. So the bikes really are not really up to scratch for their quality control. Now if it was a $500 bike, you could probably go, well, it's only a $500 bike, but the bikes are incredibly expensive. And one thing that blows my mind is a frame in Australia is around about 8,000 if you want to buy like a top end frame, like a Specialized or a Bastion Soggers. I know that's a boutique one, but the frames are around about 6,000 to 8,000 if you're looking at their best frames. Now this camera you're watching here is the top Canon hybrid camera that I've got that we're filming this on, and this is the same price. This is an $8,000 camera, and I can tell you right now there's a lot more tech in this camera than there is in a carbon frame. And not only that, camera bodies at this high end, they're not selling a huge amount worldwide. Camera sales are actually declining when it comes to removable lens cameras. And even though you may argue bicycles at the top end are not selling that many, I would probably argue that the general figures would be pretty similar, and it there's not that much technology and engineering and design in a carbon frame compared to a high-end camera. So we're seeing this, and as I said in the last video, Hambini saw a frame that came for a Bertoletti, and that frame was not one that a person brought to him that had a problem. It was just a frame. It was supposed to be a quality frame, and even that had a problem. So the whole logic of people like Pete Talk and me and Hambini being critical of the bike industry is really an unfair argument, because even now, not only are these YouTubers who are a bit kind of on the outside and being threatened by some of the industry manufacturers, but now we have mainstream magazines reinforcing that argument. So in conclusion, what we're really seeing is there's a quality control problem in the bicycle industry. And not only is a problem, we're having these online magazines now admitting to it. And of course, they've got to be careful what they say, because a lot of the bikes and equipment and everything they get are obviously from the sponsors. So they need to tone it down. So if they're actually now admitting it, hopefully this is going to mean now that the manufacturers may actually change their approach from trying to make a nicely flashily painted bicycle to something that is fit for purpose and is going to do what it's supposed to do, especially when you're paying the money we're paying at the moment and you're expecting to get a bike that's high quality. When I mean high quality, it's not just it's carbon or it's got carbon wheels or whatever, or it's got ceramic bearings, but that the tolerance of the manufacturing are very, very good. So when you put the bike together, that everything will work perfectly as advertised. Well, anyway, guys, leave your comments down below, because that really helps the algorithm, and it also builds the community, because then people can say, yeah, I've had a problem with my brakes, I've had a problem with my steerer. Another person may say, well, I bought one of these bikes, these $15,000 US bikes, and it's been absolutely beautiful and perfect. I haven't had any problems, whilst other people may have. And then you can learn what are the things that you need to look out for, and what things that are typical with certain brands. Like obviously we know with the Canon ones that they had a problem with the seat and the handlebars, so because they admitted it and everyone knows about it. But there is actually other problems that we see with bikes, typically, as we do with cars. You typically got to look out that it has this problem or that problem. So you can share that in the community, and people can learn about these products, and maybe even there could be a fix or some sort of way of getting around that problem. Anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it, and I will see you next vid. Cheers.